What's going on, guys? So I am out here at the fifth wheel. I like to start my Onan QG5500 LP generator at least once a month if I can. Sometimes it might be a little bit longer than that if the RV is essentially in storage and we're not using it, but I like to start it at least once a month and let it run for about 30 minutes to an hour, just so I can make sure that it's in good condition and everything's being kept up with. Also, so you can check the oil and other things that might potentially need servicing. But that being said, I thought about an interesting topic for a video. If you are shopping for an RV, specifically a fifth wheel toy hauler, a travel trailer toy hauler, you generally will have the option to get it equipped with a generator from the factory. And I wanted to talk to you about some of the differences and some of the pros and cons of some generators for certain types of fifth wheels over others. Now, this is going to be a very subjective conversation, so there will be folks that want to chime in, I'm sure, in the comments and explain how they use their generator, the pros and cons of their generator, but more importantly, if it's the best fit for that specific type of application or the specific application they're using it for. So let's talk about this. Hang tight, I'll be right back. Okay, so again, we got our fifth wheel equipped with the Cummins Onan QG5500 LP. This is a 5500 watt liquefied propane fueled generator, which basically means it uses the propane cans on the side to fuel it. And I absolutely love this setup for our fifth wheel. In most fifth wheel non-toy haulers, this is going to be the setup that you'll probably be able to spec in. And that's mainly because you already have propane on your RV. You're going to have your propane tanks that work to heat up your water, heat up your furnace, and run your stove. And because there's already propane available on your RV, that's typically the most convenient way to set up a generator to run. Now, the reason why I love this generator is because, well, several reasons. One, it's an inverter generator, which means it's going to power everything inside of the RV. It's extremely quiet, even considering the fact it's pretty much right underneath the bedroom. You can hear it, but it is quieter than you might think, if that makes sense. It's not like whisper quiet, but you could easily have a very quiet conversation without having to speak up over it. Some people might actually like the way it sounds when they're trying to sleep. So a lot of perks to getting this specific setup. Now, that being said, your specific fifth wheel or your toy hauler that you may be looking for might be equipped with something a little different. Typically, if you have a toy hauler, and that's really an RV that is designed with a garage in the back to hold your toys, your quads, your side-by-sides, your ATVs, UTVs, golf carts, things like that, you're going to have a fuel tank storage in the back specifically so you can fill it up, so you can actually carry fuel on board the RV to fill up your toys if you're going to be using them. Because you know that the toys have a limited amount of fuel in their tank, and if you need to refuel it, it's always good to have a fueling station. The fueling station on most toy haulers is going to be on the back. Well, if you're looking at it from this perspective, it'd be the back right side, right around where that little cargo door is there, but it's usually pretty low. And there are different qualities of fueling stations. Some of them have really cool displays. Most of them are electric pumps, but basically they're designed to transfer fuel from the onboard fuel storage to whatever toy you have in a very traditional fuel pump style manner. A lot of toy hauler RVs, regardless of it being a travel trailer or fifth wheel, may have two tanks. One of those tanks is going to be for the generator, and the other tank will be for your toys. The perk of having a gas generator on a toy hauler is typically the fact that you have the ability to refill the gas tank from your other tank. So for instance, the generator might have a 30-gallon fuel tank on it. And if you're going to be out for an extended period of time and you're really putting a hurting on the fuel in that tank, then if you have another 30-gallon tank on board for your toys, you could transfer fuel from that tank to your generator tank and essentially have an extended trip, because you're going to have more fuel available to run your generator. The challenge with that, obviously, is the fact that if you don't use fuel, specifically gasoline, and if it's not ethanol-free fuel, then you have to treat that fuel, otherwise it'll start to varnish and go bad. And what you don't want to have happen is, you don't want that fuel to start turning yellow and turning into this sludge that will essentially clog up your fuel injectors or your carburetors on whatever you're putting it through. So it's very important that you keep up with fuel or gasoline if you actually are storing that in your RV for use on your generator. Now, if you are, again, shopping for a toy hauler, you're unlikely to have a choice of what type of generator you can get. It's typically going to be the same Onan from Cummins, but it's going to be a 5500 gas generator. Again, it's going to run off of traditional unleaded fuel that you would put inside of your car. And of course, I always suggest putting ethanol-free fuel in. It's going to last longer, have a much longer shelf life before it starts going bad. But if you use it a lot, you can get away with traditional fuel from the pump. If it's going to be stored for some period of time, you're going to want to treat it with a fuel additive, something like a stable, something that's going to basically keep it from deteriorating or varnishing in such a quick amount of time. If you have a diesel generator, well, that's a whole different story. And you don't really see a lot of diesel generators on towable RVs, whether it's a fifth wheel or a travel trailer. Pretty much everything's moved to either gasoline or LP, or liquefied propane. Now, again, I like LP because there's a lot less maintenance in terms of making sure that you have fresh fuel inside of it. You're still going to have to do oil changes. You're still going to have to service it and do maintenance on it. But the one maintenance you really don't have to do is to worry about whether or not your fuel is going bad. And, you know, that's a huge relief for me. So I love the fact that we have this type of generator in here. Now, back to the topic of what we specifically have to help our RV, you know, handle power crises, which means we've lost power, everything goes down. When we put the solar system inside of this RV, it consists of two 250 amp hour batteries, both from Go Power. They're lithium iron phosphate batteries. They're massive batteries. We have a 3000 watt inverter. It's a smart inverter from Go Power. We have a really cool display panel that kind of feeds all of the information. But what's nice about this specific system is that the actual IC3000 inverter from Go Power is an intelligent inverter, and it works really well in conjunction with your generator. What do I mean by that? That means, for instance, if I lose power, the inverter's automatically going to intelligently switch over to the battery bank. Nothing actually shuts off. It literally will transfer power to the batteries almost instantly. Once that happens, if I, let's say, need to start up the generator because it's hot outside and I need to get the air conditioner going, and, you know, I want to use a microwave, or, you know, my wife is in the bathroom using her hair dryer and I need that extra power, that will tide me over for several hours actually just on those batteries. But they're not going to last indefinitely because batteries are power banks, whereas a generator is power generation. And the solar panels that we have on top, which are 290 watt solar panels, aren't enough to keep up with how quickly stuff inside of this RV will deplete power from those battery banks. They will slowly recharge those batteries, but it's not going to be an instantaneous process. Basically, we're going to be pulling a lot more power out of the batteries than what the solar panels will be able to replenish. Now, we have a second solar system on this RV, not including this little panel I have on the front, which isn't doing a heck of a lot anymore. But we have a second solar panel, or a third. We have two that you can kind of see the edges of right here for the battery bank I told you here. But when we bought the fifth wheel, Coachman had installed a single 190 watt panel on the opposite side, which goes to a solar charge controller under here, which charges the house battery. So what's really cool about this system is the fact that even if I completely deplete the 500 amp hours worth of Go Power lithium iron phosphate batteries in here, this battery right here is tied off from those other batteries. And there's no way that this battery can actually die from the other systems. The reason why is because the inverter in here is now powered off of the 3000 watt IC3000 inverter over here. And all this inverter is doing is actually providing power to something like the refrigerator or some other component inside of the RV. But here's the catch of all this. The power feature on that inverter would actually shut off if this system shuts off, and there's nothing to deplete from that battery at this point. It would be isolated from the entire system. So again, if for some reason we run into a scenario at night where we need to use the house batteries, the 250 amp hour batteries, 500 amp hours total, and we deplete them completely, and for some reason we can't turn the generator on, we still have a fully charged house battery up front, which will allow us to still operate our landing gear, our auto leveling system, and all of that. So that is really cool. So the other side of all this that's really nice is how this all interacts with the Onan generator. So our Onan generator, being the 5500 watt generator, can power pretty much everything inside of here. The three air conditioning units that we have up here are 13,500 BTU quiet cool systems from Coleman, and if we're running all three, then all of a sudden we plug a vacuum into the wall and we turn the microwave on, it's going to be more power than what this Onan can produce, and it would actually normally shut it down or flip a breaker. However, because the system we have also has batteries, this actually will allow the two to augment each other. Now what ends up happening is if we have this generator running and we're running everything else, and all of a sudden we crank something up, as long as we don't exceed the power output of the inverter, we actually have the ability to use more accessories inside of the RV, because it's going to take battery power and augment the generator with that battery power, which is really cool. So it's just a really great setup for the way we're using it. The generator is super awesome. Again, I had it running for, I think, probably about 45 minutes total, just to let it run, just to make sure everything's working well and we don't have any issues with it. It's running off of propane, which means you don't really smell anything, which is really awesome. And propane cans are really easy to swap out versus carrying fuel around. That's probably the single biggest thing I like about a propane powered generator. The fact is you don't have to carry jugs of stinky fuel around that could go bad, are going to be sloshing around. You have to find a really good way to tie it down. You can get propane just about anywhere, but more importantly, propane is such a easier fuel to transport, as well as a longer lasting fuel in terms of storability. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the difference between gasoline and propane in terms of power output is going to be there. There's your Hondas, your Yamahas, your Champions, your Furmans. Those generators that you get, if they're dual fuel, you'll typically see where you'll have one power rating for gasoline and one power rating for liquefied propane whenever you have it hooked up that way. But you know, the perks of an LP generator, whether it's, you know, built into your RV from the factory or whether you go to Lowe's and you pick one up, versus gas, are pretty much the same, right? You don't have to carry fuel around, you don't have to monitor the quality of that fuel, and you know, depending on where you can get replenished fuel, whether at a gas station or whether at Lowe's or, you know, some place that sells propane cans, is all going to be a determining factor in the convenience for you in your specific situation. The one thing you do want to keep in mind though is, as volatile as gasoline and jugs in the back of your vehicle or your truck could be, you also don't want to carry propane cans just laying down on their side. It's actually a very, very bad idea to transport propane cans while they're on their side. You always want the nozzle facing up, and that's a super important thing to remember. Now, in terms of really short trips, I don't know if it's as big of an issue. My friends over at the NRVTA, the National RV Training Academy, could definitely chime in. Actually, they have a whole video on this topic. So, you know, if you're going to the store to pick up some propane cans for your barbecue pit and you've always been throwing them in the back seat of your car on their side, or in the pickup truck just rolling around on their side, you probably want to check out their channel, because they have some really great tips and tricks on how you're supposed to transport propane cans without potentially causing an issue. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, I would really appreciate it if you took a moment, left a comment below, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, turn on notifications, and we will talk to you again very soon.